I'm Dr. Marvin Fritzler, Professor of Medicine here in the Cummings School of Medicine. It's my distinct honor to serve as the chair of this inaugural Dr. Cy Frank Legacy Lectureship. It's just over 1.5 years ago that we lost a friend, an inspirational leader and a visionary. The Dr. Cy Frank Lecture Series is one way of recognizing and celebrating his legacy as we remember his accomplishments and the impact he had on the medical disciplines that were the passion of his academic and private and public career. From the very first time I met Cy, when he was a medical student and I not much years ahead of him, I was a resident at the time in internal medicine, he was different in so much as, unlike many medical students, he seemed to know from the beginning what he wanted to do and how he was going to get there. And in doing that, he crafted around him strong support of both academic and public and private supporters with a new vision, a new idea, and in particular how you can be more productive in a multidisciplinary research environment. And that became his cause célèbre in establishment of the original Joint Injury and Arthritis Research Group, and today the legacy continues through the McCaig Institute and other institutes here in the Cummings School of Medicine. This would become his theme, his mantra, and served as what he accomplished in many leadership roles that included leadership in orthopedic surgery, the McCaig Institute for Bone and Joint Health, the Western Orthopedic and Arthritis Research Foundation, the Alberta Bone and Joint Health Institute, the newly founded Canadian Institute for Health Research, and his role as scientific director of the Institute for Musculoskeletal Health and Arthritis. See, Bob Church, I almost said it the way you do, musculoskeletal. Bob never could pronounce musculoskeletal, and I've got an epigenetic defect, I think, here, and pronounce it much the same way. And then Cy, most recently, in his leadership role at Alberta Innovates Health Solutions. In this inaugural year, the Cy Frank Legacy Lectures begin here in Calgary, and then they will continue a week from today in Montreal at the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences annual meeting, and then following that at the University of Toronto, hosted by Dr. Gillian Hawker, one of Cy's collaborators, close friends, and admirers. The primary goal of this lectureship, as I've already implied, is to promote the ideals of clinical research through engagement and exposure of the broad community in foundational matters that were the heart and soul and the passion of Cy. It is with this goal in mind that I can't think of a better exemplar than Dr. Alan Bernstein. Dr. Bernstein met Cy at the intersection in time of 2000-2007, when Dr. Bernstein began as the CEO president of the Canadian Institutes for Health Research, and as I said, Cy then the scientific director of IMHA. Following his leadership role at CIHR, Dr. Bernstein took up a new challenge as executive director of Global HIV Vaccine Enterprise in New York, championed and led and funded by Bill Gates and the Bill Gates Foundation, and he continues to serve in an advisory role to the Gates operation. Dr. Bernstein is currently president of the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research, and he has maintained a long-standing and avid interest in the research and innovation agenda here in the province of Alberta. I suggested to him last night it's time for him to buy a place here so that he doesn't have to stay in hotels, and he kind of laughed that off, but I think he might reconsider in time because we keep bringing him back. He has served as an external examiner, reviewer, consultant for a number of the Alberta Innovates corporations and establishments in that. He served as a member and continues to serve as a member of the Alberta Research and Innovation Authority, which is the venue I had the great pleasure of getting to know Alan very well, and know that he has, as I said, a strong passion for the research and innovation agenda here in Alberta. He made no secret of saying that Alberta had so many advantages that we needed to capitalize on, where we could make a difference in Canada and around the world in health research. After receiving his PhD from the University of Toronto and following a postdoc at the Imperial Cancer Research Fund in London, Dr. Bernstein joined the Ontario Cancer Institute. In 1985, he joined the Samuel Lunenfeld Research Institute and was named its associate director in 1988, and then served as that director from 1994 to 2000. He has made extensive contributions to the study of stem cells, hematopoiesis and cancer, and I told him that I had his mouse serum in my fridge up until a couple of years ago, because we did collaborate on some areas in his days when he was at the U of T. He has received numerous awards, honorary degrees, much too many for me to give a list today, but in 2002, he was named the Officer of the Order of Canada. In 2008, the Gardner-Whiten Award, and in 2015, he was inducted into the Canadian Medical Hall of Fame. That is just the postage stamp version of all of his awards and honors. As I said in my previous comment, I can't think of a more ideal person to lead off the Cy Frank Legacy Lectureship, and that is where I invite Dr. Bernstein to come and speak to us on the promise of health sciences in the 21st century, a revisit. Alan, welcome to Calgary.
Marvin, thank you, first of all, very much for that very kind introduction. I'd like to begin first by saying how deeply honored, truly deeply honored I am to be asked to give the inaugural Dr. Cy Frank Legacy Lecture. Cy was my friend, and Cy was my colleague. And he was a Canadian gem. He was a quiet, immediately likable, and I'm telling you things you know better than I suspect, and determined man whose professional passion was to make a difference in health and healthcare, and to drive evidence-based innovation in the healthcare system. And he brought to that challenge, I think, a totally unique and combination of professional skills as an orthopedic surgeon, a talented researcher, and his personal qualities as a, I think, typical warm Albertan, willingness to learn and unique ability to listen. I'll say more about that. And he had a broad, inclusive vision in which everyone felt they could contribute, they would be listened to, and they would benefit. But he also had a clear vision of where he wanted to go. Cy was not simply a sponge taking in everyone's views and then playing them back. He had a way of incorporating what everybody said, their diverse views, and there are a lot of diverse views around any table, and building a big tent. And it was a tent in which everyone felt they belonged. And he had a warmth and a quiet persona that made everyone feel comfortable. And in thinking of what else I would say or anecdotes, I'll say a couple of little anecdotes, but I want to quote Cy himself because I think he speaks pretty well for himself. And it's the first message that he put out on the web, at least, when he became president of Alberta Innovates Health Solutions. And this is just part of that message. And I had it on my, I sort of searched for Cy Frank on my machine, and Cy had sent me the message and asked me what I thought of it, so I had sort of a couple of messages clustered, so I kept them. And this is a quote from Cy. "We have a responsibility to Albertans to show that we are making a difference in their lives. The best way we can uphold that responsibility is to make it a shared one wherever possible. We all have a role to play in unleashing opportunities for innovation, no matter if we are researchers, students, administrators, clinicians, policymakers, patients, funders, industry partners, or frontline health professionals. Working in community, through engagement, in collaborations, in partnership, where ideas, resources, and expertise can cross-fertilize, this is how we will have an impact. Together, we can make a difference in the lives of Albertans." So I hope you can see from that quote, there's the words that, I didn't underline them, but I should have, but making a difference. Together, we all have a role to play. We have a shared responsibility, and then together again, and then he lists every possible player in the system. That really was, I think, the essence of Cy Frank. And his passing was a truly great loss for his family, for the University of Calgary, for Alberta, and for all of Canada. Now, I first met Cy during an exhaustive interview process of over 42 shortlisted candidates for the 13 positions of scientific directors at the Canadian Institutes of Health Research in roughly mid-2000, a few months after I was named president. I wasn't convinced, and I'm going to insult half the audience here, so I wasn't convinced that an orthopedic surgeon could lead one of CIHR's research institutes. But I was convinced by everyone who knew Cy that he was an excellent scientist and a great leader. And the interview obviously went very well. And in retrospect, the assessments that my colleagues gave me in that interview committee were bang on. And so for the next 7 years, I had the great pleasure of working with Cy as one of the CIHR originals, as Cy put it, when I asked him to organize a reunion of that original group of scientific directors and my executives at CIHR in February 2014, in Alberta, of course, at the Banff Springs Hotel. And since it wasn't going to be in Alberta, I said to Cy, "You're in charge." And so Cy, of course, then turned to Judy Crawford and said, "You're in charge." And Cy and Judy did a super job, and it was a great reunion for all of us about a year before Cy passed. And when I became a member of the Alberta Research and Innovation Authority, I had the opportunity to work with Cy again when he became president of AIHS. Cy and I talked a lot over those 2 years about the concept of a living lab and how to create a health system that, in Alberta, driven by evidence-based innovation. It was a challenge that Cy relished because it was important and because it was a challenge. So in my talk today, and I thought a lot about my talk, obviously, and it says a revisit because I gave the inaugural address to the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences. I thought I could just dust that off and away I go. So I was wrong, actually. I had to completely rewrite the speech, which I think speaks to the progress we've made in the 12 years since I gave that speech a while back. So in my talk today, I'd like to discuss 2 related topics that deal with different aspects of what I think is a very profound ongoing revolution in health research and its impact on health and healthcare. So I know there's a lot of non-scientists in the audience, so this will not hurt, I guarantee you. It'll be painless, and if you want to go to sleep, feel free, okay? So I do believe that we're in the middle of a very, very profound revolution, a scientific revolution that's opening up entirely new vistas of understanding of human biology, of human health, and of human disease. New thinking about the interplay between our inherited genomes, our lifestyle, and our environment through the epigenetic, Marvin already mentioned epigenetic, through the epigenetic changes that can occur as a result of our exposures to other people, to chemicals, to microbes, or to our life experiences more broadly. And second, I'd like to discuss the implications of that revolution in science on science policy and funding of science and the current federal review of the funding landscape for fundamental research in this country. I believe that we are truly at an inflection point in our centuries-long quest to understand the human body and the underlying basis of health and disease. We can already see that happening with cancer. I view cancer as kind of a beachhead disease, partly because it's my own background, but partly because I think it is a beachhead disease, in the sense that I think we know we've come so far in cancer, and I think it is a paradigm for other complex diseases, which I'll talk about in a moment. So when I first started out in cancer research, as Marv told you, cancer was a black box. And the young people in the audience, you may not realize this, but we knew nothing, I mean zero, about why cancer cells behave differently than normal cells. And I think consequently, we had no way forward. Now, I've insulted orthopedic surgeons, so if there's any cancer docs in the audience, I'll now insult the other half of the, I'll incite all of you. I hope we will look back at sort of the post-war period or the 20th century on how we treated cancer patients, a little bit like how we looked at the Middle Ages. When someone got sick, we bled them. And today, of course, when somebody gets sick, we give them poisons. We give them cancer chemotherapeutic drugs. And that's largely because, and this is not a criticism of oncologists, but rather just the state of the art, it's largely because of how little we knew and still don't know about the cancer problem. But that's changing. And there were clues when I started, back in a few years ago, there were clues when I started that cancer was a disease of our genes. And I won't go through that evidence, but there were some clues. But today, of course, we know that virtually all cancers, 100% of cancers, result from changes in our genome, in our genes, either mutations, chromosomal rearrangements, or viral infection in a few cases, like cervical cancer. And as a result, today we have a broad and really rich palette of tools and technologies at our disposal to understand in the most intimate detail the molecular alterations and the pathways that are perturbed that underlie the aberrant behavior of cancer cells. And that new understanding is leading to a revolution that is already beginning to change how we diagnose, make treatment decisions, develop new drugs to treat cancer, and hopefully one day prevent cancer. Now, I think, again, for the non-scientists in the audience, the way I think you should think about it is if your car breaks down, you want to go to the garage to have it fixed. If your car mechanic says, well, I have no idea what's wrong with it, nor do I have any idea how to find out what's wrong with it, but leave it to me, I'll fix it, you would probably push your car to the car mechanic next door. That's kind of where we are, or certainly were with cancer. I think that's changing. But it certainly is where we are today with, for example, psychiatric diseases. And let me say a few bits about that. So contrast where cancer is today, where we are really, I think, in this ongoing revolution of understanding the alterations and now developing drugs to psychiatric diseases. Our understanding of this very diverse group of illnesses, I think, is similar to where cancer was a half a century ago. Some clues, but little or no understanding, and consequently, no clear path to a solution. But I am optimistic that that situation will change because of research and because of the powerful new tools at our disposal. But it won't happen without talent. Close collaboration between clinicians, scientists, and clinician scientists who play a very key role, as Cy did in bone health, in bridging between the lab and the clinic. We're entering a new era of what's been called precision medicine. And precision medicine is quite simple. It's the treatment fits the patient, where understanding of the underlying basis of disease combined with a person's own genetic makeup will drive treatment decisions. The impact of precision medicine is already beginning to be felt. For example, take Herceptin for women with HER2-positive breast cancer. When a woman is diagnosed with breast cancer, one of the first things that's done now is a radioimmune assay of the kind that Marv does at his company, Mitogen, for autoimmune diseases. A radioimmune assay is done to see whether her breast cancer cells are HER2 positive or HER2 negative. If they're HER2 positive, she's treated with the antibody, the monoclonal antibody, Herceptin. If she's HER2 negative, there's no point giving her Herceptin. Okay, and to anticipate something I will say in the next part of my talk, it's important to know how the HER2 gene was discovered. How did we actually find out that some women with breast cancer have breast cancer because of overexpression of this gene, which is a receptor at the cell surface? Well, the first description, and if this was the class, I would ask the class now, does anybody know how the HER2 gene was discovered? The first description of the HER2 gene was not actually in studying breast cancer. It was in the study of a chicken virus, a chicken retrovirus called avian erythroblastosis virus, or AEV. That virus causes erythroblastosis in chickens, hence the name. And the oncogene, well, retroviruses carry genes which cause cancer. They're called oncogenes. The oncogene was called ERB for erythroblastosis gene, causes erythroblastosis in chickens. And surprisingly, or perhaps not in retrospect, normal chicken DNA, uninfected chickens, have a counterpart to that gene called ERB. And actually, all of us have a copy of that gene too. And it's called HER for human erythroblastosis receptor gene. That's the gene that was subsequently shown to be amplified in breast cancer. So how did that happen? It's an important question because I believe that in answering that question, we learn a great deal about how to fund science. And here I'm talking about tough questions like cancer 25 years ago, or mental illness or autoimmune disease today. For these really challenging problems where we don't even know what questions to ask, we may not yet have the tools, it's not helpful, really, to say, first, let's agree that cancer/mental illness/ whatever your favorite disease is a problem. That's, unfortunately, just a motherhood statement. It's also not helpful to say, let's put a lot of money towards the solution. Because usually money is not the rate-limiting step. My father used to tell me when I was a teenager and wanted a raise in my allowance, Alan, if money's your only problem, you don't have a problem. And I never could understand what that meant when I was a teenager. I think I kind of understand it now. Money is not usually the only problem or the rate-limiting problem in science, actually. The rate-limiting thing in science is usually good ideas. And money usually goes to good ideas. And so when President Nixon, so motherhood and a couple of false assumptions don't make good science funding policy. And so in the 1970s, when President Nixon declared war on cancer, literally tens or hundreds of millions of dollars were spent on testing cancer cell lines for drugs that might kill those cancer cells. Absolutely nothing came out of that program. It was killed about 20 or 30 years later. The real breakthrough in the cancer front came from a very small, obscure group of scientists. I happened to be a young trainee at the time in that small, obscure group of scientists who were studying those chicken retroviruses. And there were Nobel Prizes given because of the work that came out of that field. And to make a very long and very beautiful story short, that arcane research that maybe would never get funded today because retroviruses, by and large, don't cause cancer in humans, and who cares about chickens, was the key to open the door to our understanding today of human cancer. Oncogenes, tumor suppressor genes, signaling pathways, all the modern jargon that's the meat and potatoes today of cancer research and cancer treatment. That's how the HER2 story and breast cancer got started. Because a great deal of the relevance science, so that's an important lesson. Let's just pause there for a second. We don't know the solutions. We don't know the path to the solution. If we knew the path, those of you who are scientists will know what I'm talking about. If you knew the path to the solution, you have the solution. It's just a question of getting it done. So that's not research. That's sort of finishing the story. But today, because a great deal of the science to do with cancer is now understood, I don't think it's unreasonable to advocate for a more targeted, perhaps top-down approach to cancer research and development. And that's one reason, actually, so many biopharma companies are in that space. That's what they do. So I'm not just suggesting that we know all there is to know about cancer and that all that's left to do is to discover some drugs. Nor am I advocating that we abandon investigator-initiated, sort of bottoms-up cancer research. But I also think it's a false dichotomy that my colleagues are subject to, I think, a lot, to argue that we have to choose either between investigator-initiated or targeted top-down cancer research. And you can replace cancer with perhaps other diseases. But I would hasten to add, I would not say that about psychiatric disorders. as an example. We are just at the beginning of a very, very long journey, and anyone who thinks they know the way forward simply doesn't understand how we acquire new, robust scientific knowledge. So here I would argue we simply don't know enough. And throwing money at the problem will not necessarily solve it, and quite the opposite. It might create a lot of noise and damage the credibility of the scientific community. We gave you lots of money. What have you done with it? Where's the solution? We need to attract, first and foremost, the best and brightest young people to the question. So far, I've restricted my remarks to laboratory-based research, but the importance of research to health and health research goes beyond biomedical approaches and includes research on the health of populations and the research on the health system itself, areas that Cy was really interested in. These 4 areas of research, the 4 broad themes or pillars that were embedded into CIHR when it was created by an act of parliament in April of 2000, were viewed then as being very distinct and quite orthogonal areas of research that would never talk to each other, but be umbrellaed under one agency. In fact, there was discussion before I became president whether there should be a pre-allocation, 25% to biomedical, 25% to clinical, 25% to epidemiology, 25% to health systems research. Underlying that sort of request, if you will, was an assumption that these were very different areas that would never have crosstalk. And what I'm going to put forward today is sort of a radical idea, and I really want to thank whoever the committee that asked me to give this talk forced me to think about, is I actually think we're entering into a new era of health research where all 4 themes are going to become one. And I'm going to expand on that theme in a moment. So we know that, and I've been stressing this, the 20th century gave rise to, I think, huge advances in our understanding of life, deriving the human genome sequence, deciphering the function of those sequences, the protein networks that they encode in us, did more than just advance our understanding of the human body. I think it actually was a step change, because in one step, it transformed biology and medicine from being a descriptive science to being a mechanistic science, and now it's become an information science. Our genome, after all, is just 3 billion bits of information. That's all it is. And to an electrical engineer, for example, it's just information. And you can build circuits with information. And that's what synthetic biologists are now doing, actually. So I think we're right in the middle of a kind of different kind of revolution that has to do with the handling of data, of big data, as it's called, and transmitting that data and analyzing 3 billion bits of DNA times 200 people in this room times 9 billion people on this planet. That revolution in genomics and big data is not the only scientific and technological revolution going on in the health sciences, of course. Clinical and population epidemiology have had remarkable successes in teasing out the risk factors for disease. Of course, the most notable one is the Hill and Dahl work out of the UK in the last century, showing the association between smoking on the one hand and lung cancer on the other. I think more recently, to choose just one example, the work by Salim Youssef at McMaster University that pointed out the role of lifestyle factors in heart disease. Just a tour de force of work by a Canadian scientist. So in this century, I believe that epidemiology and population health is going to undergo a second transformation. In fact, I think it already is, in that it'll broaden its scope beyond simply looking at external factors, smoking, lifestyle, to actually analyzing the interplay between those external factors and our genetics. And that will be a new integrated science. And indeed, there's a cohort study that was started when I was at CIHR on healthy aging, where they're going to try to do exactly that. Look at both the external risk factors and the genetic factors and try to come together and answer the question, why is it that some people age well and some people don't? And I could tell you lots of stories about aging. So I think we're entering a whole new era in health research where biomedical researchers, clinical scientists, epidemiologists will work together in close collaboration to develop an integrated picture of the biological and environmental determinants of health and disease. And I think Canada is ideally positioned to lead in this new phase of health research. It was Canadians, actually many of them working under CFAR's auspices, that began to champion the notion of the social and economic determinants of health, this integrated view that was expressed in the Lalonde report in the 1970s that became incorporated into the vision underlying the creation of CIHR. But Canadian contributions don't stop there. Canada is the country, of course, where stem cells were first discovered in Toronto, and right here in Calgary, at the University of Calgary, where Sam Weiss and his colleagues at the Hotchkiss discovered neural stem cells. So we have a proud track record at the very highest level in contributing to this revolution in the health sciences. And we have very strong genomics and proteomics community, and we are truly world leaders in those areas. And we're also, again, under auspices of CFAR, the world leaders in artificial intelligence. Deep learning, which is the technology that's now used by Google and Facebook and every other major Silicon Valley company, was developed here in Canada. And I mention artificial intelligence and deep learning because it's the technology that's going to be required to analyze all that sequenced information when we study populations, large populations of data. How do we sift through all that data and make sense of it? So I think our health system is going to change profoundly because we will be able to identify people who are at risk for disease way before they get disease. And if you think about that and the implications for healthcare, so now I'm not talking about research, but healthcare and healthcare delivery, and how we relate to patients or people who aren't yet patients, but are just citizens, and say, okay, you have this lifestyle and this genomics risk factor, you have an X% probability of getting diseases A, B, C, D, or E, or not. And also, of course, if you think about pharmacogenetics, not everybody, not all of us respond to the same drugs in the same way. And many people respond badly to drugs and have adverse drug reactions, which cost them hugely and cost our healthcare system hugely. And there are pilot studies going on in Western Ontario on psychiatric illnesses to really predetermine which patients will get an adverse drug reaction and not prescribe that drug for obvious reasons. Okay. So I think we're going to see really a profound convergence of all these areas. Okay. There's a number of other, I think, forces at play here. I've mentioned or alluded to changing demographics. We're an aging population. We're a country, of course, of immigrants. We have a very diverse population. Diversity means diversity in genomes. Diversity means diversity in life experiences. You think about the Syrians who are coming here and how that's affected their epigenome. So we have a very unique population structure, which actually is an advantage, I think, in this new era. It's also an era of multidisciplinarity and team grants and teams. I think to be successful today in health research, you've got to be in a team. You cannot encompass all the things I've been talking about with one PI, one principal investigator, and one or two students or postdocs. We're talking about teams, large teams, usually or typically international teams. Strong institutions are essential, more than ever, I think, to the success of these teams, because teams are made up of individuals, and strong institutions are the soil that allows individuals to flourish, and strong individuals make strong teams. So now I want to quickly turn to the second part of my talk, which was the announcement by Canada's Minister of Science, Kirsty Duncan, of a review of the landscape for the funding of fundamental science in Canada. This review, I think, is timely because it's been over 20 years since the Canadian government started to reinvest in research. And over that 20 years, there's really been a proliferation of agencies and programs that fund different aspects of the research and innovation ecosystem. So I'll start with some free advice. David Naylor from Toronto is chairing that panel. Some free advice to what I'll call the Naylor panel. I think the review should start first with some pre-questions. Questions about that maybe at first blush have nothing to do with the landscape for the funding of research. And those questions include, why should Canada invest in research in the first place? What are we hoping to achieve through our investments in research? What are the international trends in the organization and funding of science? And how can Canada learn from those international trends as we remodel, or not, our own research system? In other words, form follows function. So I believe we should first decide the function of a health research system and then decide the best form. So let's try to answer that very first all-important question. Why should Canada invest in science? Research provides Canadians with high-quality jobs and supports our growing high-tech and knowledge economies. Research drives evidence-based change in our health system. You know, I once asked in Toronto a bunch of board members, if they got ill, where would they want to be treated? And they all said, oh, on University Avenue, one of the teaching hospitals. I said, why? And they said, well, that's because the best doctors are there. And I said, why? And they kind of hesitated. They didn't quite know the answer to that. And I said, I'll tell you why. It's because that's where the best science is. And science keeps everyone on your toes. Science demands evidence. Science is all about change. You cannot do the same experiment twice. You cannot discover something the second time. And so the best young people want to be in an environment of evidence-driven change. That's why the best doctors are there. And that's why science is essential to a strong healthcare system and research more broadly. So the benefits from research are evident, actually, not just health research, in every aspect of modern life. All of us want longer, healthier lives for ourselves, for our families, for our loved ones. We want a world free of terrorism. We want a world free of the inequalities that challenge the stability of our countries and of the world. We want solutions to the complex problems of energy and climate change. We all want secure and safe food and water, and of protecting the global environment. And we want all the conveniences of modern life that enhance our quality of life. We all have cell phones. We all flick a switch and the light goes on. We all get in our cars. We all heat our homes in the winter and cool them in the summer. That's all because of the innovations that come from science. And we all take them for granted, as we should. And as a middle power, Canada has, with a reputation as the honest broker and a peacekeeper, and the aspiration to once again assume a significant role in the world, we need all the instruments of soft power. I don't think we're ever going to be or should want to be a military power to help us achieve those aspirations. So science and research provides a powerful common language that transcends boundaries. Language and culture enables us to reach out to other countries to address problems together and to experience the joy of discovery together. All Canadians actually have a natural curiosity about our world and the universe in which we live. So I went on a hike to the Burgess Shale in the Rockies a few days ago, and there were two young guys on our guided hike with us. And I asked them, why do you care about finding fossils? We were going up to look at the Burgess Shale. They said, well, it's really interesting. You know, where did life come from? So that has no practical bearing that I can think of on anything today. But these young kids were really interested in early life on the planet. And so I think when people talk about we need to get kids really interested in science, actually I think we need to get our education system from stopping to getting them from de-interested in science. Every kid is interested in science. Okay. Studies by many economists have shown that investments in research pay off. It's been estimated that by about half or as much as 85% of productivity growth in the first half of the 20th century can be attributed to science-driven technical advances. Other studies indicate that 50% or more of the more than seven-fold growth in productivity here in this country since World War II is attributable to innovations that come from investments in R&D. As you know, here in Alberta, better than anyone, the precipitous drop in the price of oil is a wake-up call. And it's a wake-up call not just to Albertans, but to all of Canada. We need to diversify the Canadian economy and reduce our over-reliance on a small number of products for our economic well-being. And as everyone in this room knows, research is the fuel that drives the pipeline of innovation that leads to improvements in healthcare, new drugs, new imaging technologies, new ways of diagnosing disease, and new ways of delivering healthcare. The fact that research provides a healthy economic return is just one reason to justify research. Research also has led to revolutionary improvements in health. And I could go on for 20 minutes on that, but I'll just give you one statistic. Since Confederation, not quite, but almost 150 years ago, the average lifespan of the average Canadian has almost doubled. Think about that, almost doubled. So the average Canadian born today will live to about 82 from birth. It was about 41 150 years ago. So if you were 42, you were beyond the average lifespan of the average Canadian. It's an amazing statistic, and on and on and on. In short, the research community in this country has every reason to press our case that research is one of the very best investments that any country can make to assure the future of that country. But research alone is necessary, but it's not sufficient to drive innovation. An innovation ecosystem is required to ensure that we capture all the economic, social, and health benefits of our investments in research. So I'm going to speed up a little bit because I'm running out of time. So I think that especially is true in healthcare and health innovation. What industry is looking for today, from the biopharmaceutical industry to car manufacturers to the energy sector to finance, are the breakthrough technologies that have the relevance to their business and will give them a significant competitive advantage. Hence, I believe that the proper role for government today is to complement, not duplicate, business investments in research. There's a column today in the National Post by Frank Solomon where he argues the government should pull out of research. It's politicizing research. And I would argue he's exactly wrong. Because only governments, not business, only governments can fund the high-risk, high-timeline research that's required so that business can then take it to the next stages of innovation and scale it up to the marketplace. And only governments can support the breadth of research that's required to make advances, because we don't know where advances are going to come from. I mean, here at the McCaig Institute, if you think about the variety of disciplines that are involved, from engineering to immunology to cell biology to imaging, all the technologies that, and I'm leaving out a lot, that you require to make true advances in bone and joint health, and one area of health and disease. No company can afford to fund the early stage science in that area. Only governments can do that. And that's the best way that governments can subsidize industry, because a smart industry will then jump on that and take it from there. And so I think governments should complement, not duplicate, what's going on in industry. There's a current debate going on in the health research community about changes in peer review. Now, those, and I'm not going to comment directly on CHR for obvious reasons, but I think it's an important debate because confidence in peer review is important for the funding of high-risk, high-impact research. And actually, in light of Frank Solomon's column today, it's important because peer review is the best way to depoliticize research. These are not decisions made by politicians. These are decisions made by peer review, by other scientists. So while peer review, and I think it's actually great, I've been following the debate. One of the things that really pleased me was how engaged both Minister of Health Jane Philpott was, but also early career investigators here in Calgary and across Canada. It really showed engagement and involvement of young people in their own future. And I think that's essential, obviously, and important. So while peer review is the immediate issue, I actually don't think it's our long-term challenge. I think our long-term challenge is to move away from debates about basic versus translational research and discussions about funding excellence in research versus funding research with relevance to industry, and to focus on how best to achieve true impact from scarce resources and even scarcer talent. And how do we fund the most creative investigators, especially early career investigators, and provide them with the opportunities to advance science and our understanding of health and disease? And how to forge a path of this new integrated view of health research and help build an evidence-based, cost-effective healthcare system. So I think now is the right time to re-engineer the research landscape to enable the Canadian academic community, the private sector, and government to work effectively together, with each assuming distinct but complementary roles in the research and innovation system. This re-engineering should be grounded on what we're trying to achieve as a country through our public investments in research, on international trends and increased prevalence of interdisciplinary teams, international teams, and problem-based science. The review should set us on a recharged and ambitious course that will achieve the overarching goals of excellence at the highest international levels, a robust and diversified economy, an innovative health system that leads the world in research-driven change, and that enables the health research community to get on with their job of advancing our knowledge of health and disease and helping to build a stronger economy. Minister Philpott has clearly emerged as a champion of evidence-based policy and innovation within the health system. So I think it's a really important moment for the Canadian health research community to respond confidently and boldly to these exciting opportunities and to articulate a dynamic and forward-looking and compelling vision for health research, a vision that aligns with the aspirations of Canadians for a long, productive life, rewarding opportunities for their children, a diversified and strong economy, a cost-effective and affordable healthcare system, and an innovative health system, and a place for Canada in the world that aspires to greatness through our respect for the diversity of the world's people and understanding of the importance of community and community values, something that here in Alberta you know better than anybody in this country, and that values knowledge and knowledge creation as central to Canada and the world's future. I believe it's a time for leadership of the very sort that Cy Frank showed in his time as head of the McQuaig Institute for Bone and Joint Health, as a scientific director at CHR, and then as president of AIHS. Thank you for your attention and for the opportunity to give this talk.